thing about working with Dr. Seuss is that if I want to make up stories, I can. Because Seuss made up stories all through his life. And thank you, Rena and Ed Klump. They are the owners of the gallery. This evening is very special, of course. I know that you've got some of your gallery clients here this evening, but this is really about my mid-low friends. So I'd like to shout out to everybody. Thank you guys, personally, seriously, so much for coming out and seeing the gallery and the exhibition. And it's a real old home week for me. So I'm just thrilled to be here. And Rena's correct. You know, as I've traveled, you know, the country and actually the world over the past 12 years with the Seuss collection, who knew I'd be back in Midlothian? I mean, how long has the gallery been here, Rena?
Less than 3 years.
3 years. So 3 years ago, Rena and Ed opened up the gallery, and we got a phone call saying that we would like to represent the Dr. Seuss collection, and we go through the approvals on that on a gallery-by-gallery basis across the country. And it comes across my desk with Midlothian. Yes! Yes! I don't care what the gallery looks like. Little did I know the gallery was gorgeous, beautiful. So you guys have a real asset here in your community. And before I kind of get into my little Seussian talk, I want to just say that supporting the arts is one of the most important things you can do because it's so hard to keep an art gallery in your community these days, especially. So, you know, yes, the Dr. Seuss artwork is for sale, but really, if any artwork that they carry or any framing that you need, or my wife is already looking at the jewelry here. The gallery will make out fine this weekend with my wife, Lisa. So, you know, support the arts, and just by being here and telling your friends. The exhibit will be here for the next month, is that correct?
October 14th.
Until yes. October 14th. So tell your friends, come in, learn about Seuss, find out about Seuss. It's going to kind of blow your wig as it did to me about 12 years ago. And I'll just start with that story. I was in the art business for 10 years. A lot of you, my friends that are here from Midlothian, we lost touch after the 10th anniversary, 10th year reunion when I was here last. And I was in California, in Venice, working in the art world. And then I was in New York City in 1997, and I went to the very first exhibition of Dr. Seuss artworks. So I'm in New York, and I see a couple of these paintings reproduced as beautiful serigraphs, and I'm like, literally, what the hell is this? I didn't know about it. Nobody knows about it at that time. Nobody knew about it. And to this day, very few people know about the Art of Dr. Seuss. Yes, we know about the children's books and the illustrations, but what people don't know is that at night, Ted Geisel, Theodor Seuss Geisel, or Ted, as his friends called him, Ted Geisel painted at night for himself during his entire life. And he never showed those paintings during his lifetime, or rarely ever showed those paintings. He's working on books. He's working on World War II editorial cartoons. He's working on advertisements. He's working on all these projects through his life. And at night, when he was done working, what he loved to do was paint. And if his children's books was the heart of the man, his artwork was his soul. And I think you can see that in many of the paintings that you have here in the gallery. The paintings, let me start there. The paintings are all in his home in La Jolla, California. Mrs. Audrey Geisel, his widow, is there. She's 91 years old. Last month in August, she turned 91. So Audrey is in the home with all the original paintings and the original sculptures. And they never traveled, they'll never be for sale. And she did give us permission in 1997 to do these authorized estate editions. So we were able to reproduce these artworks in really high quality levels. And the same thing with these artworks. The originals are in the home, and when I go there and research the home, I actually get to measure them and take pictures of them and make notes as to how we're going to recreate them to look like the original work. So Mrs. Geisel's given us permission, and that's what you're seeing in the gallery here. These are authorized estate editions from Ted Geisel's work. And that's what I love about it, because people came in, and Keith came in, Boz came in and said, I didn't know about any of this, I didn't know about this. And people have been saying that for years. We never knew Dr. Seuss did this, and that's why it's such a great joy to be able to share it here with my friends and with the community. Especially some of my favorites, which are, not as maybe kid-friendly as everything else. This is one of my favorites here. that Ted did. He did a whole series of artworks when he moved to California called the La Jolla Birdwoman series. And he's making fun of California socialites when he moves there. And all of them are women doing different things. And this one is a woman in a coffin on the phone. And you don't know what's going on until he writes underneath what she's saying. And she's saying, oh, I'd love to go to the party, but I'm absolutely dead. How many of us feel that way from time to time? Well, everybody made out tonight. So this gives you a sense of the body work that I love. I mean, the children's work is really important in terms of American literacy and history, but it's the paintings and the sculptures that, for me, are, I think, some of the richest and most wonderful elements of his career. And I love his adult work, because his adult work is this wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of a humor. You know, he never crossed the line and never got dirty, and he never went in that direction, but he didn't know he was going to be the world's best-known children's book author when he started to write books. And so before he wrote children's books, he's just doing paintings and drawings of what he loved, and his humor, adult humor, was very wonderful and very rich. So we get to explore some of that. And I'm going to point out an example or two in a few minutes. But this exhibit here that's traveling around to different museums and galleries is based on the museum panels that I curated a few years ago. And these panels, you may not get a chance to do it tonight, but over time you can maybe come back to the gallery and look at it. You can read through these panels. It kind of tells you a whole different level of Seuss's life. And it really delves into the varied careers that he had. And I'm just going to give you a short little timeline on how Dr. Seuss became Dr. Seuss. And I'm going to take a couple of questions later, so you guys got to think of a question or two. Make one up if you have to. I'm not going to let somebody ask a question. What this exhibition does is it really tells you that before Seuss became Seuss, the children's book author, he started as a little-known editorial cartoonist in the 1920s. And Ted Geisel went to Dartmouth College. Anybody go to Dartmouth around here? So Ted went to Dartmouth College. Then he went to Oxford. He was going to get his doctorate in literature. But after a 2-hour lecture on the punctuation of King Lear, he decided, forget this, I'm out of here. And he left college and he traveled Europe for a year. And he came back from Europe, didn't know what to do with himself. He started sending cartoons off to the top magazines of the day, and Saturday Evening Post sent him $25 for his first children's, his first actual editorial. And so he goes, aha, that's it. I'm moving to New York. He moves to New York City. He gets a job with a magazine called Judge Magazine. And you'll see that a couple of covers that he actually did the artworks from Judge Magazine. No longer around as a magazine. But he's in New York. He's doing editorials. He's not Dr. Seuss. That's about 12 years away. But he's just making fun of different things. And his first couple of cartoons is making fun of a bug spray called Flit. And does anybody remember Flit bug spray? This is back in the day, and Seuss came up with a tagline called Quick Henry the Flit, which was a tagline for that ad campaign. But he's first just making fun of this bug spray, and we've got the first advertisement over here, and it's got a little girl and a little boy in the front of the yard, and the boy's gargling something, and the father's hanging out the window going, whoa, 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 what's going on out there? And the girl says, don't worry, Papa. Willie just swallowed a bug, and I'm having him gargle with Flit. Oh. That was the first advertisement to use humor to sell a product. So Dr. Seuss's contribution to advertising history is humor, a very little known element of his career. So Ted Geisel, that Flit ad campaign is so successful, it just takes off. And all of a sudden, he's starting to advertise not just for Flit, but for Chilton Pens, Holly Sugar, Ford Motor, NBC, General Electric, and on, and we go into his whole advertising career. And here's actually a beer tray from 1941 from Narragansett Beer. And I'm going to move this for 1 second. I'm going to be careful because I don't want to have to buy this thing. I think it's sold. So this is kind of interesting. Can I take this off, Rena, Ed?
Yeah.
Do you mind? Okay, I got it. So on the left, on your right-hand side is a Ford Motor ad right down here on your lower right, and it's got this character holding a stick with a glove. And if you look above it, you'll see that 12 years later, that character becomes Sam I Am in Greenest and Ham book. So here is the Ford Motor ad with the character and the glove and the stick, and then Seuss recycles and evolves and changes his images and his characters throughout his children's book. I will put it right over here.
They had a wonderful sense of humor then. I'm very surprised at General Motors. Didn't know they were that.
And it's surprising that they let him advertise in such this way. I mean, wouldn't you love to be a lawyer and get a hold of that one? The gargling of the flip bug spray? I mean, that's just a lawyer's dream. You can't advertise like that, obviously, anymore. And so this gives you a sense that he's doing a whole series of advertisements, and he's really successful in taking off as the Dr. Seuss. He's becoming known as Dr. Seuss, but not the children's book Dr. Seuss. The kind of wacky, zany guy who was advertising Flip bug spray. And then the Flip bug spray is so successful, it goes on, it becomes almost the Where's the Beef advertisement, the Got Milk advertisement of the day. Does anybody know the Lorax book by Dr. Seuss about protecting the environment? The movie came out, we all know it now. So years before the Lorax book came out, about 20 years before it came out, here's an advertisement, quick Henry the Flip, improve with DDT. So Dr. Seuss is promoting DDT so you can spray it on your kids and protect them from the bugs. That's the guy who wrote the Lorax. So as we go through what this exhibition does, it really kind of gives you a deeper look at what he was doing during his time, and especially his artworks, because at night he's doing paintings, and we actually put these chronologically. In the 1930s, 40s, he did these art with these heavy black backgrounds, and then the imagery kind of pops forward. This is from 1934, halfway between his first editorial cartoon in 1927 and his first book in 1937. So there's this 10-year period between his first editorial and his first children's book. But look at, you know who's coming down the road here. In his children's books, just about 3 years after this, he writes his first children's book. Yet you see the fish from McGilligan's Pool, and you see the turtle stacking up years later, Year of the Turtle. So Seuss is Seuss through and through. And one thing you find when you look at his artwork and his collection, his oeuvre, you find that that golden thread that runs through everything he does is that Seussian quality about his work. And you see that in his artwork, and you see that in his editorials. I think I jumped over it, or maybe World War II is maybe down there, I don't know. But in World War II, in the 1940s, Ted Geisel stopped writing children's books for 7 years to dedicate himself to the war effort. And he did over 400 political cartoons between 1941 and 1943. I don't know if we have Naughty Problem here or not, that print.
Yeah.
We do?
It's down the other end.
Right? Okay. You don't have to get it, that's okay. Everybody's going to go see it, but I'm going to tell you what it is. Naughty Problem, this just tells you, how, the kind of mind that Ted Geisel had. 1942, actually 70 years ago exactly, he came up with this editorial cartoon it's got Uncle Sam looking over the Congress. And Congress is running around with plumb bobs and scales and all these kind of measuring tapes and trying to figure out, the title that Ted gave it is The Naughty Problem. And this is great. Thank you, Rena. You're welcome. So there is Uncle Sam in the upper left, and the Congress is running around, and they're measuring and trying to figure it out. Some are playing tic-tac-toe. All this stuff's going on in there. And get this, the name of this is The Naughty Problem of Capitol Hill, finding a way to raise taxes without losing a single vote.
There you go.
That place today, that's exactly right. Rena, I'll give this back to you. So he stops writing children's books for 7 years to dedicate himself to the war. He won a couple of Academy Awards for documentaries during World War II. Very rich career during that period. Then he picks up children's books again. And before I get into children's books, I want to just step back because, again, before he's really known as Seuss, you get a sense for who's coming down the road and what this guy is going to be, because some of his first poems had that Seussian sound, that kind of rhythm and that cadence and that wordplay that he's so well known for. But this was written well before he wrote his first children's book. He didn't know who he was going to be. And I'm going to read this to you, and you're going to be a little bit shocked, but I'm going to read it anyways. His first poem is Mrs. Van Vleck of the Newport Van Vlecks is so goddamn rich she has gold-plated sex. Whereas Miggles and Mitzi and Sue have a commonplace thing that just has to do. So Ted Geisel, at a certain point in his life, when he realized who he was becoming, he kept everything that was adult, personal for him and his friends, outside of the public. So he maintained this really clear, super clean persona out there. And but I personally love to go back and look at these little elements that show you that this guy has a great sense of humor no matter who or what he's doing. And one more poem here. He took a friend's book and he just wrote on the inside of that friend's book, just kind of off the cuff, it says a little poem called, "How was I to know?" And the poem says, "Just one thing more I asked God, point blank, as I was about to be born. Do I or don't I tip the obstetrician?" And there's another one that goes back, let me see, where's the flock of obscs? And the panel may not be here, but there's a piece.
It is on the other side.
Is it there? Okay, great. So there's a panel over there that has this other great poem written in 1941, I believe. I forget the exact date. But it really shows you, I think, one of his best alliterations. And it was during the Depression, so it was probably 1930s, Depression. And it was about probably discrimination on people not being able to find a job. And we all kind of are in that day to day. So, but this poem was, I found it in the University of California, San Diego's archives. That's where there's 7,500 items that Dr. Seuss gave to UCSD to house for him, and that's where the Dr. Seuss archives are. I have the really good fortune of being one of the few people who can go and actually research those works and then make selections for artworks that we're going to bring into galleries or museums. But this little poem I found in the archives, and it's called "The Sad, Sad Story of the Obscs." O-B-S-K-S. So you can say that, obscs. Obscs. This is great, and this was Seuss is so brilliant at, his wordplay. And an obsc is a big bird, not too different from any of his other big birds. It's actually, an obsc was very much like a sneetch. And on this two-page panel, this flock of obscs was actually all happy and moving up to this town of obscs. But the second panel, the obscs were heading down, dejected, back to the town of Obscs. I haven't read this in a long time. Let me get this right. A flock of obscs from down in Nobscs hiked up to Bobscs to look for jobscs. Then back to Nobs, with sighs and sobs. There were in Bobscs no jobs for obscs. I just think that shows you just how brilliant this guy was. And Bennett Cerf, if you guys remember Bennett Cerf, the publisher of Random House, used to say that of all the authors that he published, including James Michener, Eugene O'Neill, and all the others, he said, Dr. Seuss alone among them was the genius. And Ted Geisel would say, if I'm a genius, why do I have to work so hard? And so as we kind of go through this, I just want to give you a sense for what's here and what you can share with your friends, that there's a whole different level of work that Ted Geisel was doing. And I think that as parents and grandparents, we know this. When you read a Seuss book, you realize that it's kind of working on two different levels in many cases. Some of the books are just pure fun, and there's not another message in there. But many of the books are working on two different levels, and that's really clear to adults and eventually clear to children. A couple of other art stories I want to tell you about. Before I do, I got to talk about these here, because in the 1930s, Ted Geisel created a collection that he called his collection of unorthodox taxidermy. His father was a zookeeper. Actually, his father was the superintendent of zoos in Springfield, Massachusetts, where he grew up. And so Ted got all these great ideas about animals and characters, which is all through his books. But his father gave him the horns and the beaks and the antlers from deceased animals at the zoo. And then Ted Geisel kept them in a box until he moved to New York City. And then in the early 30s, he started to make these sculptures. He decided he wanted to make what he thought these animals would want to be reincarnated as. And he came up with, Seussian names that are just up Seuss's line. The semi-normal green-lidded fawn. The Andaluvian grackler with that great wig. They're kind of a Beatles-esque wig. The Mulberry Street unicorn, the sawfish sculpture, and the original had a real sawfish bill on that. And then the two-horned Druberhanus, which had a real Thomas Gazelle antlers on it. And to me, this is one of the gems of the collection. He did 17 known taxidermy sculptures. And we've published 14 of them, so there's only 3 more that will come out, one every year in the next 3 years. So this is a really great, unique collection that's one of my personal favorites. Oh, and Anthony Drexel Goldfarb is right over here, with Seuss Animal. And then, I'm just going to pick your art up, Rena. I hope you don't mind if I break it. So this here is a sea turtle, and it had a real tortoise shell on it. But what he does, and this is great Seuss humor, it has a turtleneck. And then he puts a fuzzy tail on it, by the way, also, just to Seuss it up a bit. So I wanted to mention that collection there, and the other thing, there's 1 or 2 other artworks I want to talk about. And Rena, I'm going to trade this for Prayer for a Child.
Okay.
Do you want me to carry it over there?
I got it. Prayer for a Child.
And I heard somebody talking about this. So somebody, knew this story. I'm trying to see if I can see that person. That's gentleman right back there. This artwork here is called Green Cat with Lights. And let me grab this real quick.
Oh, now I see. I thought it was a Christmas tree.
It looks like a Christmas tree.
Oh.
You're disappointed, aren't you? You thought it was a Christmas tree.
No, I love cats.
So great. 2 years ago, Mrs. Geisel let me into the house. I've been up there several times to the home in La Jolla, California. And you go in there, and it doesn't look like you might expect crazy, wild Seussian. It's a beautiful, elegant home. But there are Dr. Seuss artworks, here and there throughout the house. And so she let us come in to take photographs of the art collection. And we photographed them, and we created a book. We're very proud of the book that won the top award. This is kind of funny. Last year, the Independent Publishers Awards gave us the gold award for our book, which is called Secrets of the Deep, on the art and life of Theodor Seuss Geisel. It beat out, the second book was called Picasso Looks at Degas. An exhibition, you may see that's actually going around in some museums. So I think Ted would really love the fact that his book actually beat out Picasso and Degas in this case. So we went to Mrs. Geisel, and we finished the book, and we went up there, and we were sitting with her in the home and going through it and showing her, and she said, this is exactly what we wanted for Ted. This is exactly it. Because she had been approached by many, many people to publish posters of Dr. Seuss, and she said, no, for many years. And then finally we approached her and we said, we would like to create fine art of Ted Geisel's work. We feel he's one of the most significant 20th century artists, and he should be hanging in galleries next to Picasso and Miro and Chagall and Rembrandt, etc., etc. And she said, that's my vision, because nobody knows about his artistic legacy. And that's what's so important to me, because that was so important to Ted. And so as we're going through this book with her, and she's loving the book and saying, this is exactly what we wanted, we turn to the book, and we get to this page that has this artwork here, Green Cat with Lights. And we say, Audrey, we've always wondered, and this is last year, mind you. I've been working with the collection for 12 years. I didn't know the answer to this till last year. We say, Audrey, why did Ted sign this artwork, and only this artwork, Strugu von M? Every artwork's of Dr. Seuss. This is Strugu von M. Very bold yellow paint, And so she said, oh, Ted used to hang that in the front of the house. And this was a prank. This is a total prank, because Ted Geisel wanted to be taken seriously as an artist, but he didn't want to put himself out there to be judged year after year like he was with his books. He also was a contemporary of Norman Rockwell, so he knew that commercial artists were never considered great fine artists, so he would have been panned. Can you imagine an art gallery hanging this in 1952? Theodor Seuss Geisel's artwork was crap. So he was very smart to hold his artwork back until he could be judged in the context of who he was as an American icon now. And so he wanted to be, known as a serious artist, but he was reluctant to put himself out there. But he wanted to know, so he puts this painting in front of the house to get honest feedback. And so when people come to his house and they come in and go, "Oh, what's this?" And Ted would say, "That's my Strugel Van Am. How do you like it?" Yeah. And at least on one occasion, somebody said, "Oh yes, I'm familiar with Strugel Van Am. I have 3 of them." So you kind of get a sense for who your friends are real quickly when you get a comment like that. One other artwork I want to talk about here is A Prayer for a Child. This is an artwork that he did in about 1955, and Collier's magazine ran a whole page on this artwork at the top, and then this poem. Very unlike Ted Geisel. Ted Geisel steered away from religion. He wanted his works to be accessible to children of all faiths. So even though he was Christian, he didn't want to push that because he wanted it to be a broader market, he wanted it really to work with everybody. So he did this beautiful poem that goes in here. Do we have the poem here?
Yeah, it's on the wall.
Is it on the wall?
Yeah,
I
Reno
think
will
I
bring it
remember all
back.
of it, but one line will trip me up. So he did this in 1955, but this will tell you a lot about who this guy is and what he's like. Thank you. Because several years later, back in the 1980s, a advertiser came to Herb Scheidt, his agent, and said, "We want to use a Dr. Seuss character in our advertisement." And Herb said, "You know what? He'll never let you use a Seuss character in an advertisement, but you know what? Here's this poem he did. He's forgotten about it. He doesn't even remember he did this, I'm sure. You can use these words in this poem," and the advertiser was thrilled. They created storyboards, they mocked up the ads, they came to Ted, they showed it to him, and Ted said, no, I don't want my artwork or my name to be associated with a pharmaceutical product, of which the effects on children I don't know. And the advertiser was very disappointed, came back and doubled the offer in money. And then Ted said, "No, thank you." And then Herb Scheidt, his agent, said, "Ted, I have to put my agent's hat on here. If you accept this offer for what is fewer than 100 words, you'll go down in the Guinness Book of Records as the author paid the most money per word." So Ted thought about it, and he said, about a couple of minutes, he actually sat there and thought about it. And he said, "I'd rather go down in the Guinness Book of Records as the author who refused to be paid the most money." And I want to tell you the poem that goes along with this, called A Prayer for a Child, is "From here on earth," and you can see this. I'm going to get my one line that I always mess up. "From here on earth, from my small place, I ask of you, way out in space. Please tell all men in every land what you and I both understand. Please tell all men that peace is good. That's all that need be understood. In every world, in your great sky, we understand, both you and I." So that gives you a sense for who this guy was. He was.
I want that on a Christmas card.
That's a great idea. That would be a great one, and you can go ahead and do that.
Good.
So I feel like I never met Ted Geisel. He died in 1991 at the age of 87. I started working in the art world in 1990, 1 year before he died. And then I had the good fortune of coming into this Seussian realm and working with him. But obviously I spent a lot of time with his wife, with his biographers, with friends of his, and I've interviewed everybody that was kind of in his world at that time. But more than anything, I feel like I get to know who Ted Geisel was through his artworks. And I think that anybody that knows surrealism will look at some of these artworks and go, they have a real surrealistic quality about them. And Ted Geisel, when he left Oxford, he actually traveled in 1926 to Paris and France. And the surrealist movement hit in 1925 in Paris. and then had major exhibitions in 1926. And Ted Geisel was there on the ground floor when Surrealism broke in Europe. And then he was in New York City now working when Surrealism came over from Paris. So you'll see the influence of Surrealism in some of his paintings. You'll see the influence of abstract expressionism in other works. So I think Ted Geisel can't be defined by a certain artist or influence, but certainly genres influence him. And the artwork on the up far right over there, we got to look at this. This is great. The black and white artwork. Is that anybody notice an influence there from that artwork? Which artist might influence that? Thank you, M.C. Escher. And you see an M.C. Escher quality in that artwork. And again, remember we talked about the flock of obscs, the birds? That's another. They're all birds. And the name of that piece is The Economic Situation Clarified. And in 1971, when you look closely at that artwork, what you find is that birds are going up in this direction, and they're upright, and they're happy, and they're smiling, and the tufts on their necks are fluffed up. And then just like this obsc story, when they're coming down, they're hunched over and they're frowning. And then when they're going up, it's happy and down. And as the economy is going up, we're happy. And as the economy is going down, we're sad. And that's the economic situation clarified. Ted Geisel is very brilliant about what he did in the many layers of his works. And I think that artwork is really great. And everybody has to wear their Dr. Seuss for President buttons proudly. And I see some of us are, so that's great. We're definitely nominating him this year. He, of course, wrote some of the great social political works of our time. The Lorax, Yertle the Turtles, about bringing dictators down. And Horton Hears a Who, about a person's a person no matter how small. So this kind of gives you a sense for who Seuss is and a little depth into his works. But before I go, I need to have a question or two, and then we'll let the party go. Yes?
How did you get involved in writing the children's books? How did it sort of go from artist to children's author?
Well, as a commercial artist, he was realizing that if I illustrate this book, which he started to illustrate several books, I make $500. But if I had written that book, I might make $5,000. It was a pure commercial decision on his part, because I think that I should maybe get more money for my artwork. And the other thing is that he actually, when he was doing advertisements, he had a clause in his agreement where he couldn't do all sorts of things. He couldn't advertise here or there or whatnot, but he could write children's books. So he decided, oh, I'll write a children's book. And he took that children's book to 27 different publishers around New York City, and he was rejected 27 times, and he was about ready to throw it in the garbage can, and he ran into a friend from Dartmouth College who the day before had been hired as a junior editor for Vanguard Publishing. They took it up and said, we like it, we'll publish it. And they published it, published Ted for 2 years, and then he went over to Random House after that. So another question? Is he bad to the bone? Is that a question?
George.
He was bad to the bone.
He's
Yes.
your friend.
I saw over here that LBJ called him after he was talking about the Lorax. Did he meet any presidents, or do you know?
Yes, and actually LBJ, this is a great LBJ story. Liz Carpenter was actually Lady Bird's press secretary. And after LBJ was out of office, they were putting together his presidential library. And Ted Geisel was at a brunch with Liz Carpenter. And Ted was talking about Lady Bird's beautification movement. And Ted said, I wrote a book about beautification. It's called The Lorax. And this, from Ted tells it, Liz seemed it just when she left the room. And so, it kind of went on from there. But what happens is Liz left the room, and she calls LBJ, and she says, I'm having brunch with Dr. Seuss. You should ask him to donate his Lorax book, Lorax artworks, to your presidential library. Put him on! So Geisel picks up the story. Then Liz Carpenter comes out with the president wanting to talk to him on the phone, and so gives the phone to Ted. LBJ, classic move, skips the asking and says, I want to thank you for donating your artworks to my presidential library. Classic LBJ move, and so yes, they actually went out for the opening of the LBJ library and met LBJ, and then Ronald Reagan, I know, sent him a nice personal card congratulating him on his award in San Diego. Another question? Yes.
I don't have a question. I was talking to my sister today and told her where I was going. She lives in Houston, Texas. And she told me that she remembered me reading Dr. Seuss books to her. We're 10 years apart. She remembers me reading Dr. Seuss books to her, to bed for a nap. And she told me that one of her favorite lines from Dr. Seuss was, "Do not cry because it's over. Smile because it happened."
Great, thank you. Do you know which book that was?
I have no idea.
Neither does your sister.
Yeah.
This is great, and Ted Geisel would love this because there are so many wonderful misquotes out there. And that's the most famous one on the internet.
Really?
That is not Dr. Seuss.
Okay.
But somebody went in San Diego, went to a funeral, and they had several Dr. Seuss quotes in his own town of San Diego, and that's the number one. Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. And that is myth, and Dr. Seuss was all about myth. He used to make up stories. When he was interviewed, he would make up stories, and he would tell fibs, and people would
So
write
do I
in the
break her heart
newspaper.
and tell her he never said it?
Pardon me?
Do I break her heart and tell her he never said it?
No! Only us here in Midlothian know the story.
He could have said it.
Another question? Last question? Yes.
Am I wrong that I thought Dr. Seuss didn't have any children?
Dr. Seuss had no children. He said, "You have them, I'll entertain them." And the last thing, the one question I usually get, and I'll just kind of end with this, is that a lot of people say, was he a doctor? Was Dr. Seuss a doctor?
No.
Well, he was not a doctor. He went to Oxford to get his doctorate, but he actually never got it, as we know. And the story about how he became the name Dr. Seuss, where did the name Dr. Seuss come from? Theodor Seuss Geisel, his middle name was Seuss, at Dartmouth College. He was the editor-in-chief of the College Humor magazine, which makes complete sense. So the guy had this position that he'd wanted all his career at Dartmouth. He got it his senior year. He's the editor. And then, this is during Prohibition, in 1926, and he was busted splitting a pint of gin with 10 buddies. It was Prohibition, so there had to be consequences, just like in Midlothian when Mark and I got busted for drinking. I made that up, that's not true. I said that. So when, I gotta get back to my story here. So Dr. Seuss said that the pint of gin, there had to be consequences, and they wouldn't let him contribute to the College Humor magazine anymore. And he was devastated. So right at this time, Ted Geisel was no longer contributing cartoons. But all of a sudden, these cartoons were being contributed by Thomas Mott and L. Osborne, and one by T. Seuss, and then one by Seuss. And so nobody knows your middle name in high school or college. And so Ted Geisel was sneaking in his cartoons. And then after he came back from Oxford, and so he was Seuss. He used the name Seuss for a couple of years. And then after he came back from Oxford and didn't get his doctorate, he decided, I'm going to save my dad a lot of money, and I'm just going to put doctor in front of my name. And that's what became Dr. Seuss. So thank you guys so much for coming out. We got some wine over here, and I want to hang out and talk to you guys more. So, one last thing, tell your friends about the exhibition, support the arts, share the word, let everybody come out and see it. I think you'll agree it's just a fun show to share.
Thank you, Bill.